Our last panelist is my colleague, Myra Strober from Stanford. So she's a professor emerita in the School of Education and a labor economist.
Good morning, good afternoon, it's afternoon now, everyone. I've probably been working on this problem longer than anybody in the room. I was the first woman ever to teach at the Stanford Business School. I was hired in 1972. There were 90 men and me. And at that time, I disagree with you about the progress at Stanford, not in electrical engineering, but the rest of the time. When I came to Stanford, women were 4% of the entire faculty. They're now 26%. So we've got a long way to go, but we have made progress. And what I really want to talk about today is what lessons I have learned from economics, from Stanford, from being a consultant. My husband is here too, and we have been consultants together for businesses that wanted to increase the proportion of women in tech, the proportion of women in management. What do we know about this? I've also written a memoir called Sharing the Work, and there are some flyers for that memoir. You can get a discount at the registration table. But in that book, I talk about what the changes have been like, what the battles have been like, and how we came to win some of the battles. So what I want to say is that we need a three-part program for changing the percentage of women in tech, just as we needed a three-part program for changing the percentage of women in management. And by the way, at the Stanford Business School, when I first came, there were 5 women in the MBA class, total, out of 350. They made a slideshow called "What's a Nice Girl Like You Doing in a Place Like This?" And then the business school decided that they were going to recruit women, students. And they asked me if I would help recruit. I recruited for 1 year because as soon as women heard that the Stanford Business School and other business schools were accepting women, women flocked to apply. And there was no need to recruit after the first year. Why did Stanford decide to have women MBAs? Because they were being pressured by the Business Advisory Council, who in turn was being pressured by the federal government to hire women managers, and there were none because none had been trained. So don't underestimate the power of the law. We don't have much push on the legal side anymore, but push is very important. Also important is a long-term view. We have to increase the talent pool. And we need to rethink the curriculum at all levels of schooling. Think about it. Today, any child, girl, boy, who doesn't know how to read is given coaching in how to read. But boys are much more likely to have problems reading than girls. Girls may have more problem with spatial relations, with math, but it's considered acceptable at some level for girls not to do well in math or spatial relations, in a way that it's not considered acceptable for boys not to be able to read. We need to fight that. We need to say all students at the very young levels must be competent in math. And we need to change requirements in math, as we have done in many places, so that girls are now doing better on math tests because they're required to take more math. We need to teach courses differently. At Stanford, more girls drop out of the pre-med program than boys do. We don't know exactly why, but we do know that the so-called weeding out course, which is organic chemistry, is much more unpalatable to girls than it is to, well, women at that point, to men. Why are we teaching chemistry in that way? Why aren't we teaching chemistry in a supportive way instead? So all of us need to be asking these kinds of questions. We need to market STEM fields as helping professions. We know that women are interested in helping professions. Many engineers have said to me, I feel I'm in a helping profession. I'm helping people through my work, but that's not how engineering is marketed. So we need to think about changing that. We need to rethink recruitment and hiring. We need to get commitment from top and middle managers. We always talk about getting commitment from top managers, but we need commitment from middle managers. I can't tell you how many companies are listed in Working Mother magazine as a model company, and some woman will come and say, I work for that company. I don't see how they could possibly be considered a model company. My manager wouldn't let me do A, B, or C. So middle managers need to be brought on board as well. We need to set targets and rewards for managers who meet them. We know how to do this. We set targets and we give rewards all over the place in business, but we don't often do it for recruitment and, even more important, retention. Managers should get a bonus if they're good at meeting their recruitment and retention goals on diversity. And we need to challenge prevailing assumptions about the right places to recruit and the right person for a job. I think of a situation, my husband and I were both involved in some consulting for a professional services company where they had lost all their senior women and now they were having trouble recruiting junior women. So they asked us to come and interview and gave us a consulting fee, and we came and said, you need to think about bringing in women at the associate level who are perhaps 45 years old, recently divorced, and want a new career. And they said, what? Bring in 45-year-old women to sit next to 25-year-old women in the same job classification? We said, yep, try it. Oh, no, we can't possibly try it. Why? Because 25-year-old men and 45-year-old women cannot work together. Try it. Nope. And we said, you've paid us all this money to come in and consult with you, and you won't even try it. That's what we mean by reconsidering prevailing assumptions. I still believe those 45-year-old women would have gotten along with the 25-year-old men. Finally, build a culture of support at the workplace. A number of years ago, the provost at Stanford asked me to head up a committee to look at recruitment and retention of women faculty at Stanford. And one of the things we did was interview junior faculty. And we found that junior women and junior men felt that they'd been totally abandoned. They were recruited, they were the best and the brightest all over the world. They came from the best places, and then they were brought to Stanford and essentially put out to pasture. They often couldn't even get senior men to read their work. There was no culture of support. And we found that we were losing women, we were losing men. And again, we have to challenge the prevailing assumptions. The prevailing assumption is that everybody is paid fairly. That is not the case. And we found, after we finally got the provost to release some salary data to us, that men and women were not paid the same. And interestingly, women scientists said that they felt that it was not their job to learn how to negotiate. It was their job to do science. And we said, in a better world, yes, your job would be just to do science. Right now, your job is not only to do science, but also to negotiate. So challenging prevailing assumptions about fairness and the way the world is supposed to be is very helpful. And finally, being proactive in helping employees to balance work and family. And never assume that you know what the best way to help somebody balance work and family is. Some people, when they come back, men and women, from paternity or maternity leave, want to take up their position just as they were before and move forward. Other people want to step aside for a few months or possibly even a few years before they resume the travel schedule that they had before. You won't know who wants which kind of career unless you talk to that person. And you need to think about an individual approach to what is often an individual experience of having a child, especially a child with special needs. But I totally agree with Andrea. There is nothing about having a family that means you can't also have a fantastic career. It just may be on a slightly different and perhaps more zigzaggy path than otherwise. So 3-part program. Think about this as a long-term program. I remember when I first founded the Center for Research on Women at Stanford, we came up to all the deans for permanent status. And one of the deans was very nervous about giving the Center for Research on Women permanent status at Stanford. And I could see from his questions and his face that he was very nervous. And I asked him about it. And he said, you know, I just want to be sure that when this problem is solved, you'll agree to sunset the center. And I thought to myself, that's an easy one. And I said, as soon as this problem is solved, we will sunset the center.